Day 974 of the Trump administration. Once again, we have breaking news tonight centering around that explosive whistleblower complaint from inside the administration that has set off this latest battle with Congress. The Washington Post has already reported the complaint, which was filed with the Intelligence Community Inspector General, involved Donald Trump's private communication with a foreign leader that included some sort of promise. Importantly, the New York Times reported today the whistleblower's complaint is said to involve multiple acts by the president. But now tonight, a short time ago, the Washington Post breaking the latest on this story in a 4-byline piece that includes Carol Leonnig, who will join us in just a moment. She and her colleagues report, quote, a whistleblower complaint about President Trump made by an intelligence official centers on Ukraine, according to two people familiar with the matter. 2.5 weeks before the complaint was filed, Trump spoke with the Ukrainian president, who was elected in a landslide in May. That call is already under investigation by House Democrats, who are examining whether Trump and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, sought to manipulate the Ukrainian government into helping Trump's re-election campaign. Democrats earlier this month demanded records related to what they say are Trump and Giuliani's efforts to coerce the Ukrainian government into pursuing two politically motivated investigations, one to help Trump's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, a second to target the son of former Vice President Joe Biden. You may recall this comment from Trump earlier this summer about receiving information on political rivals.
Your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it.
The House Intelligence Committee has been trying to get its hands on the actual whistleblower's complaint. They've been met with a refusal from the current acting director of national intelligence, who consulted with the Justice Department on this matter. We can't stress enough, this is highly unusual, if not unprecedented. The refusal comes even as the intelligence community's inspector general noted the complainant, quote, met the definition of an urgent concern and that the complainant's disclosure not only falls within the DNI's jurisdiction, but relates to one of the most significant and important of the DNI's responsibilities to the American people. Well, tonight, the president's lawyer, in an eventful interview on CNN, Rudy Giuliani, said, quote, it is perfectly appropriate.
All I can tell you is if what is reported is true, it doesn't make a damn. It doesn't make any difference. If the president of the United States said to the president of Ukraine, investigate the corruption in your country that has a bearing on our 2016 election, isn't that what he's supposed to do?
In a moment here, we're going to be able to speak to the former CIA Director John Brennan. Our panel is also standing by. But first, we want to get straight to one of the reporters on this breaking story, the aforementioned Carol Leonnig, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for The Washington Post. Carol, lay out as best you can for our viewers the allegation here, the phone call, the backdrop, and anything else we've left out.
So many things about this story, Brian, which, we learn something new, it feels like, every day since Chairman Schiff's letter. But so many things about this are surprising and unprecedented. And tonight, my great colleagues at the Washington Post, especially on the national security team, I was just an assistant, essentially, to this story. But they, and with a little help from me, broke the story that this complaint about multiple communications by the president that were viewed as a flagrant and serious abuse involved his discussions with the president of Ukraine. And there are a lot of questions because this complaint was filed August 12th, just 2.5 weeks roughly after the president had spoken with the president of Ukraine. And according to a readout from the Ukrainian government, the discussion was the president of our country, President Trump, saying that Ukraine could really help their reputation if they could complete these investigations into corruption. It would really help with relationships between the two countries and that they could really help their image. So already you have sort of this red flag being waved about this July 25th call. On August 12th, a whistleblower whose identity is not yet public comes forward, and then somewhere along the line, the Inspector General who's received this complaint is blocked from reporting it to Congress, even though it is defined as an urgent concern under the statute.
Forgive this very basic question. Is there any evidence that is a direct line and not a dotted line that connects the nature of this whistleblower complaint with the Herculean and unprecedented efforts to keep this secret?
Well, I hope I understand your question properly, Brian. This whistleblower is under what I can only imagine must be the most intense pressure, because on the one hand, there is this terrifying element called the Espionage Act. And if you violate it by sharing anything that is truly sensitive and endangers our national security, you're in a world of trouble. But on the other hand, there is the Whistleblower Protection Act that was passed into law in the 1990s for intelligence personnel so that they could come forward with sensitive materials. There was great fear that they weren't allowed to come forward because the material was so sensitive. And that act right now is basically being stalled. And it appears that at least the Justice Department was conferred with about this decision that the acting director of national intelligence made, blocking the IG from going forward and alerting Congress about the substance of what the president said that was so worrisome, the promise that he made allegedly to the Ukraine.
Carol Leonnig has agreed to stay with us, and right now joining us by telephone is the former CIA Director John Brennan, also happens to be our senior national security and intelligence analyst. Director Brennan, when you hear Rudy say, as he said tonight, if what they're saying is true, it doesn't make any difference. He just becomes the latest person I've heard recently to say, in effect, some form of the president can say whatever he wants. Is that your understanding?
Well, I think Rudy's defense and Donald Trump's comments in his tweet are belied by the very, very rigorous effort that the administration is undertaking to prevent this whistleblower's complaint from going to the intelligence committees. If it was appropriate in their minds, if it was something that they had no concerns about, why are they making this Herculean effort to prevent it from going forward? It's clear that the whistleblower and the Inspector General of the Office of the DNI have followed to the letter the procedures in the Whistleblower Act. And from my perspective, the acting DNI, Joe McGuire, who I know well, and I have had a lot of dealings with him. He's a straight shooter in my mind. I'm sure he consulted with his general counsel to make sure that what he would be doing was consistent with the law. But unfortunately, I think now the Department of Justice has become involved, because I wouldn't be surprised if Joe McGuire's general counsel consulted with the Department of Justice, which would be normal procedures. And it's clear that our Attorney General is a highly politicized individual who will use the instruments of power of the Department of Justice to protect his client, Donald Trump. And so I don't know to what extent Joe McGuire is being coerced, intimidated, threatened by the Department of Justice to not take these actions. They could even be saying that there could be legal action taken against him if he were to go forward and share this complaint. So this is clearly a very abnormal, very worrisome situation where the whole intent of the Whistleblower Act is being flouted by the Trump administration and is preventing information that truly should go to the committees of jurisdiction in the Congress. And so I think we are at this point of seeing this trampling of our laws and procedures by a individual in the Oval Office who is being supported in this by an Attorney General and the Department of Justice that are not fulfilling what their responsibilities and obligations are under the law. They are looking to do what the White House and what Mr. Trump wants done.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.